All right. Good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. On today's show, we're continuing our supply chain buzz, where we're going to be bringing to you the latest and most important developments across the global world of supply chain. You're going to find the buzz every Monday morning at 9 a.m. right here across any of these social platforms. And stay tuned for what should be a very informative discussion where we're looking to raise your supply chain IQ. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Great to have you here with me. Hey, quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoy our live stream episodes, be sure to check out our podcast. We publish Monday through Friday, sometimes on Saturday. And today, as an example, we published an outstanding podcast featuring Mickey Horner with Rise Against Hunger. It's part of our Logistics with Purpose series sponsored by our friends over at Vector Global Logistics. So you can check that out and subscribe wherever you may get your podcast from. That was a great episode, Greg.
Yeah, that one was inspiring to say the least. First of all, I love that whole series, right? And Enrique and the team at Vector for helping us bring that. But yeah, what a great story that is.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed the purpose around that, the passion around that, the supply chain know-how that these nonprofits are really, doubling down on. It's so important. But yeah, check that out to our listeners wherever you get your podcast from. And let's see, we've already welcomed in my fearless co-host, but let's do it formally. Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, looking forward to the 5 stories we've got teed up here on today's Supply Chain Buzz, right?
Yeah, lots happening in the last week. A lot of, let's just call it Monday morning quarterbacking happening around supply chain. And people, you know what, if you watch us, you're going to get my opinion. You're definitely going to get it today.
That's right. Before we talk about what April 20th means on this day in history, let's give a quick shout out to Pradeep, who has joined in on LinkedIn with us. I want to give a shout out to Neil Shaw, a friend of mine from high school. I had a great conversation Saturday. He had some observations.
Yeah,
Greg.
So I heard Neil said that guy just shows up wanting to talk about anything.
He nailed you.
He's unbelievably perceptive.
But Neil, it was great catching up with you over the weekend, and great to hear about all your business success. Okay,
yeah, impressive.
So
really
let's talk about today.
Why, Scott? Why he reached out? Hey, I'm telling you, we have a broader reach than I think we realize, and cool to be able to reconnect with folks you've known over the years, all the way back to high school. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. It's neat to hear. It's neat to have conversations that start with, "Hey, Scott, it's been 25 years." So, anyway, so let's talk about April 20th. On this date in 1916, the first game at Weigman Park was played. Greg, do you happen to know what Weigman Park became?
I do happen to know, and I'm going to go in reverse order why, and that's because I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, and before that, as a kid, I spent some time in Chicago. It's Wrigley Field, the famous Wrigley Gum family.
That's right.
And the Wrigley Mansion, by the way, there's a Wrigley Mansion in Phoenix, Arizona, because like anyone smart from the Midwest, they found a place warm to go in the summertime.
Okay.
Rich.
You're still on my thunder. I had no idea. I'm going to have to play a new game called Stump Greg White. We'll bake that into next week.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay. All right. On this date, in 1951, the late legendary entertainer Luther Vandross was born in New York. On this date in 1972, Apollo 16 lunar module landed on the moon. Humans would land on the moon only once more after the Apollo 16 mission. That would be Apollo 17 on December 1972. What was that, Greg?
Shout out to fraternity brother Neil A. Armstrong to be the first man to set foot on the moon. Fight else forever.
Wow. Okay. All right.
And also, this has to be one of the most thankful days for lovers. Luther Vandross, some of the greatest love songs you will ever hear in your life.
Legend. Absolute legend.
Unbelievable.
Want to say hello to St. Clair and Claudia, of course. St. Clair, great to be with you. I've enjoyed seeing a lot of your thought leadership you put out on LinkedIn here lately. St. Clair was on a great webinar with us probably 2 or 3 years ago. That was really well received, Greg. And of course, Claudia, we're looking forward to her comments and questions here today. All right. Moving right along. Important.
You missed one episode, right? So we got to get her back. I was worried about her. Welcome back, Claudia.
On this date in 2008, Danica Patrick won the Indy Japan 300, becoming the first female driver in history to win an IndyCar race. So neat milestone there. Now, April 20th represents 420 around the world, especially in the cannabis world.
Yeah,
so,
talk about getting your buzz on.
That's right. And that industry, as we know, which Greg, you can speak much more informed than I can. That's a really hot industry. People are doing companies are doing big things as cannabis continues to be utilized more and more from healthcare to lots of other purposes. And a quick shout out to Colton and his team are going through a lot of growth, right?
Yeah. So the team at Flourish, they are a seed to sale technology provider for the cannabis industry. Cannabis industry includes CBD, which is not THC, obviously real cannabis products, and hemp. So hemp in the States has become legal again. And now we're back to making rope and, all of the other clothes and all the other amazing products that you can make from hemp as well. But yeah, today is 420. I read an article over the weekend that a lot of people are celebrating it virtually, of course.
Whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Quick shout out, Ashraf, Memory, Joseph. Great to have y'all. Melda, great to have all of you with us here today. I'm trying to keep up with our LinkedIn feed that is off to my left here. All right. Everybody's getting a jump start on Monday morning. It's great for folks to be tuned in with us. Okay.
Well, remember, it's only morning here.
That's right. That is right.
We've been at work all day.
So, Greg, with no further ado, let's dive into the buzz and our first story. And I'm going to adjust this screen here. So, Greg, we're talking about supplier relationships in an article from Supply Chain Dive. Tell us more.
Yeah, particularly in these times, supplier relationships are under a lot of strain. Recently, over the last few weeks, we've heard the term force majeure. A lot of people have learned what force majeure means. I'll tell you in case you don't know, force majeure basically means we give and we're not going to adhere to the contract terms because of what are called acts of nature, sometimes acts of God in a contract. Sidebar note on that, by the way, I have a friend named Nirmal Stevenson, and when we did business with him, he's from Chennai in India. And we were negotiating the contract, and part of that negotiation was terminology, of course. And we had a term in there called acts of God. And Nirmal sent me a note back and said, I agree with all the rest of this contract, but acts of God, we need to change that because all that comes from God is good. So I actually went to my lawyers, and he said, I've never had anybody protest that particular thing, but let's call it acts of nature for the future. So isn't that amazing? And a great lesson that I learned from Nirmal and continue to learn from him today. But this force majeure is essentially saying we can't, because of external circumstances outside of our control, we can't perform to the contract. And we are basically disowning our performance requirements because of that. So that's happening a lot. A lot of contracts are really, really complex in the procurement world. Companies are, they're going relationship based more than contract based. And I think the point of this article, when you jump into it, the point of this article is that if you want to be able to have that kind of leeway in your relationship, either as the customer or as the supplier, you need to have developed that relationship prior to this emergency era. And by relationship, it doesn't just mean pat on the back and high-fiving one another. What it means is a relationship that shows performance and commitment prior to this event, and you get a lot more leeway. One of the quotes from the article said, in this emergency, it's too late to make friends. So, and we've talked a lot about relationships and trust over the last several weeks. This is another example of building trust through performance and being able to survive a time like this. So read the article. It's very quick. It's very short read.
Outstanding.
Interesting analysis.
Hey, I'm gonna put you on the spot again. A stump Greg White here. We got a great question from I believe one of our listeners on Twitter, listener NPR. How come Purell can't restock its retailers? Now I know this is kind of out of right field for you, Greg, but if you had to,
I'm a center fielder anyway, so I covered the whole thing.
You're already on this morning. Okay. Well, so what's your take there? Quick take.
The supply or the demand way outstripped supply and continues to. In fact, one of my wife's most favorite moments was when we stopped into a Walgreens and got the last bottle of hand sanitizer that they had. Not Purell. I think it was Walgreens brand. I'm not sure, but part of the issue is we've outstripped the capability of the supply chain of not just Purell, but a lot of the other hand sanitizers. And getting that back in line or back online has been difficult. Raw materials are an issue these days. We're going to talk about this at greater depth in one of these articles as we talk about one of these articles. But a lot of things that have occurred are unprecedented. Boy, we say that almost as much as new normal, don't we? But the reality is, and I'm quoting somebody. Sorry, Brad Jacobs here. Should have remembered that name, right? CEO of XPO. I'm quoting Brad Jacobs here. This is a seismic societal disruption, not a supply chain disruption. I mean, if you think about it, we completely stopped, and what didn't stop was completely inverted in terms of demand. So it's just really hard for companies to recover now with workers not being able to come to work or not feeling comfortable to come to work, with raw materials being sourced from places where they can't be shipped from these days. Transportation is difficult. And there are all kinds of interventions by government and that sort of thing that are impacting that. So there's a lot going on. We'll go into more depth, so hang tight.
That's right.
When we take a look at this Investors Business Daily article.
Hey, want to give a quick shout out. Cassiano and Craig and Kyle are all listening to us on LinkedIn. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for tuning in.
Great alliteration there.
That's right. It's all planned.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, so let's go to story number 2 here. Let me get my talking points here. So the food chain's weakest link, according to this article at least, is the slaughterhouses. Last week here on The Buzz, we talked about some of the meat and pork processing plants that were being idled due to COVID-19 concerns, right? That micro trend is continuing in recent days, as reported by the New York Times in this article. Now, more than a dozen beef, pork, and chicken plants have been shut down. But it's really important to keep perspective here, right? There's absolutely a lot of concern. There should be a lot of concern around keeping our supply chain workforce healthy and safe and protected. However, there's over 800 plants that are part of providing processing for meat and poultry and pork. So we're talking 12. So the sky is not falling today, but it's really important that folks look at these plant closures, and we all understand the huge importance of protecting our workers. So let's talk a little bit more about this here.
Yeah.
So according to this report, cattle processing dropped 22% last week versus a year ago. Hog processing dropped 6% versus a year ago. So despite that these plants, that there's not a ton of them going down, still the impact's being felt. And some of these 12 plants, to be fair, are very large sites. The most recent plant closures are at Smithfield Foods sites in Wisconsin, Missouri, and South Dakota. So, over the weekend, Greg, also speaking of workforce protection, I spoke to a plant manager at a very large automotive manufacturing plant here in the States. And this plant was identified as essential. They provide parts to the defense industry as well as to a lot of the industry vehicles that keep society moving, trash trucks and other things. He told me how tough it's been to manage the workforce with protective measures in place, physical distancing, for example, the difference in shifts, right?
Right.
They've even identified, this site here identified that they identified the high risk folks and sent them home with benefits to try to keep the overall workforce, protect those folks, but also to keep everybody healthy. So the good news here, based on this one anecdotal conversation, but hey, you look for signals, right? Good news is they're seeing a lot less and less attendance issues. So their workforce is rebounding, is getting healthier and healthier. So that's great. But just that conversation, and certainly this article in the Times, Godspeed to all of our men and women that are out there across supply chain and manufacturing and production and transportation, you name it. Of course, our healthcare workers and our front lines. It's good to see that industry get a lot more attention and appreciation in recent weeks, but we want to see the same thing for the supply chain workforce, right?
We do. I mean, I think there are a lot of people on the front lines, and they are really doing a great job and maintaining a great spirit. We talked about this a couple of shows last week as well. I'm actually encouraged and uplifted when I go to I'm rarely allowed to go to the grocery store, but when I do, I'm uplifted by the spirit of those folks working right there on the front line. And of course, not to equate it with the healthcare workers and what they're going through, but there are a lot of people coming at people in retail and distribution and manufacturing. Yep. I think another point, besides the fact that this is a small sample of sites here in the country, is, look, let's face it, we're living in hyperbolic times. These companies, many of these traditional media companies, are fading in terms of revenue, and they have to be hyperbolic to get clicks and likes and whatever. But the other thing that's important to recognize is slaughterhouses are perishable materials, and we are wasting billions of pounds of food right now because of the perishability of it. So it's proper to slow down these right now. And while meats can be in short supply, they are not out of supply. So, this is what it's like, by the way, to live in an Eastern European country or the Soviet Union back in the day. I've visited those countries, and this is still a lot better than that ever was. So, but I think we have to put this in perspective, that we need to be aware of the waste in the supply chain as well, because as we were researching for this, Scott, there were an equivalent number of articles that we could have looked at that talked about the waste of perishables as well as the shortage of goods.
Yeah, good point.
So let's just keep it all in perspective, as you said.
Yep. That the context and perspective is incredibly important right now.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick aside, Claudia mentions plastic containers and foods is up 15%, and organic produce is experiencing a big decline. Interesting comment there, Claudia. Fred Tolbert, going back to the hand sanitizer comment from Twitter. Hand sanitizer, Fred says, is textbook Apex beer game stuff. Real world bullwhip effect there. Good stuff, Fred. And, we managed to spend an hour and a half with 3 supply chain students at the University of Georgia last week, courtesy of Fred. He's doing a lot of mentoring there. And, Greg, I can't wait to publish that episode, which should be this week, because
I think we're going to try and do that Friday, right?
That's right. The future is bright.
It is.
These 3 students were some of the most measured and engaged and intelligent,
organized.
That's right.
Right. Analytical, all of those things. I mean, truly, all of those things, we've talked a lot about, and we hear a lot about, and we're about to talk yet again about some of the flaws in the supply chain. And one of those is a lot of manual intervention, a lot of spreadsheets, that sort of thing. Yep. I think this next generation, because they are so technically savvy, they are going to demand technologies that help to prevent and solve rapidly these kind of issues.
Yep. Quick shout out, Baba GD. Interesting discussion here on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us there. Appreciate that. All right, so moving right along, let's dive into the third topic here. If I can find the button, Greg. All right, we're talking about coronavirus business closures and its impact on supply chain. Tell us more, Greg.
Yeah, this is the one. So this is another newly minted expert in supply chain from Investor Business Daily. Look, this article makes some really good points. If you are in supply chain today, I'll warn you, it will probably irritate you pretty substantially, and you'll say a lot of things like, "Yeah, of course that's true, but," or "Where have you been for the last," pick the amount of time you've been in supply chain. But there are some good points made in this, and one is that lean and just-in-time inventory is a drag on the supply chain because there is very little backstock, particularly at manufacturing, and that is part of the issue that we're seeing, as Fred alluded to. Part of the bullwhip effect: store runs out, distributor runs out, manufacturer doesn't have any backstock and has to pump up production. Also, and we've talked about this for weeks now. This was my "where have you been" moment in this article. Offshoring, particularly to China, and also having a single source for goods. What this article talked about is that many experts feel that and I'm quoting here, massive overhaul is needed of the supply chain. I really think massive overhaul is not necessary of the supply chain itself. It's more of the strategies around supply chain and the risk that companies formerly didn't see as risk that they've been taking. But, that may be picking nits at this point. But it's an important viewpoint so that companies do awaken to the fact that they have been a bit careless, and maybe a little bit cavalier with how they've managed their supply chain, largely to save cost. And that's another point of this article. It can't be just about minimizing cost. It has to be about balancing inventory cost with serviceability. And one perspective I want to point out here is that this was almost solely researched with manufacturers, and the dynamics of manufacturing retail are substantially different than manufacturing supply chain, are substantially different than the dynamics of retail and distribution supply chain. First of all, the margins are much, much greater at manufacturing. And secondly, distributors and retailers do build in safety stocks appropriate to the amount of demand fluctuation that they typically see, and targeting, the level of service that they want to provide to their customers, which is, of course, always really very high. One other counterpoint that I think is important is that, particularly at retail, safety stock is often buffered by presentation stock, making the shelves look full. Because as an old-time retailer, if you look like you're out of business, you are out of business, right? That was sort of the mantra of retail. So you might only sell one a week or even a month, but you've got 3 on the shelf because that's what it takes to make the shelf look full. So there are some alternative impacts there as well.
A couple of quick observations. It's interesting how they use the word unmask in the title. A bit of a subtle point there. It's kind of weird. Claudia states, Deloitte outlines a concept they are calling digital supply networks as the redesign of supply chains. And Memory's got a good question for you, Greg. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So Memory asks, how do you make up the costs of lost revenue due to enforceable extra costs for storage of items imported overseas and are being held up for clearing at customs? So she's got a second question, but any initial.
Again, I think that goes to detention at the ports, probably, right? Can you just Read that to me one more time.
So Memory asks, how do you make up the costs of lost revenue due to enforceable extra costs for storage of items imported overseas and are being held up for clearing at customs?
I don't see you making that up.
Right.
I really don't. I mean, in a time of crisis, right? We just talked about force majeure and things like that. I think you wind up eating it. But I have to tell you that if anyone needs to start to do their part, it is these ports, and they need to relieve the detention fees where goods simply cannot be moved because the government has intervened to essentially stop commerce.
Yep.
So I think what companies need to do is they need to get together and go back to the ports and customs facilities and beg for mercy, whatever you want to call it, but they need to go back and try to get some recomp from the ports.
Do you think force majeure will be in play in those types of situations?
It depends on the contract. And as you know, the thing you got to think about is ports are government entities unto themselves. So think about this. Here in Georgia, you're asking the state government to give you relief from something that the federal government did to you and to them.
Yep.
So I could see that being very tough. I can tell you this. The federal government in the U.S. has not laid off a single person that I have heard of. So while the rest of us are giving back to society,
yep.
Government employees, even who are not working, are continuing to be paid.
Well, hot takes with Greg White. So Claudia mentions, can you cancel those orders? Perhaps, I don't know. But great question, Memory. I know there's so many moving
once
pieces.
They're in the port. Yeah, I think that would be tough once they're in the port.
Yep. Great.
There might come a point though where it becomes cheaper to let them have the goods at the port and just disassociate yourself with them. I can't imagine it coming to that, but
I think that some of that was going on, a month or so ago when the Chinese ports were, they didn't have enough manpower to handle all the containers coming in. A lot of containers, especially with produce and foods, kind of set and died in the port, I believe. So,
and it's easier to do on that side, right? On the export side of the ocean, if you're the importer. Right?
So, Josh, before we move on to story number 4, Josh Labar, who is with Sonnen, which is an outstanding, innovative energy company, but also a manufacturer. They do a lot of battery, like modern, forward-looking battery products. He came on as an interview guest in one of our last Today in Manufacturing episodes. So, to our audience, if you haven't checked that out yet, please do. It's an outstanding episode. Josh asked this morning, Greg, and I'll share a first thought here, and I'm gonna get your take.
Thank you. Take a little pressure off.
What do we think will be the key takeaways for raw material manufacturers going forward post COVID-19, or as Gartner is calling it, the aftermath that we're hoping to get into? Not sure if I've ever looked forward to the aftermath of anything, but we are in this case. That's right. So, based on a lot of conversations we're having from industry leaders, especially procurement and supply chain leaders, price has been so dominant when it comes to sourcing raw materials that oftentimes it seems, generalization warning here, that procurement and supply chain leaders are looking past other potential risks and concerns to address that need to get the lowest landed cost possible. And based on what we're hearing and seeing and some of the conversations both in supply chain leadership and their valuable advisors, legal and otherwise, that are helping them, kind of figure out the current solutions for addressing issues and new strategies. I believe that while it may come back in a couple of years, I think price it's going to be more balanced in terms of the priorities that folks consider when sourcing raw materials for their global supply chains. I think there's going to be a lot more vetting going on in terms of country of origin, in terms of quality, in terms of safety, and a lot else. That's right, legality.
Yeah.
But Greg, what else would you share on that great question from Josh?
I think that this seismic societal disruption, we need to stop saying that the pandemic is causing this, by the way. Let's call it a seismic societal disruption. I think this seismic societal disruption is merely a catalyst for what should have been happening anyway. And aside from the fact that it is going to crater a good number of businesses, I think it's time that this sort of recognition occurred, right? The single sourcing that we talked about, the ethicality in supply chain. I mean, last week we talked about the continuation of forced labor, which is a euphemism for slavery, and ethical sourcing and sustainability and provenance. Daniel Stanton continues to talk about my favorite and Chris Barnes' favorite word, provenance. Provenance. Those sorts of things are going to come to the fore, and they have been attempted to be brought to the fore by companies in the past, but now I think we'll see a more universal demand for those sorts of changes in the supply chain. That will be the most productive aspect of this shift in the supply chain in the new normal.
A lot of good, to your point, a lot of good and a lot of improvement and a lot of industry transformation that will benefit everybody is going to come out of this. I'm convinced. There's still a lot more research and data in terms of what has taken place and what is taking place and what changes need to be made. But I'm convinced that there's a big silver lining here, despite all the pain a lot of folks and companies are going through. Hey, St. Clair has a great comment here. The relatively recent earthquake and tsunami in Japan exposed the risk in the Toyota supply chain and their practice of clustering suppliers near their manufacturing plants. Mm-hmm. That's a great comment, because we see that clustering in automotive and aerospace, amongst other industries, and we are going to have to revisit that long held strategy of the clustering effect.
Yeah, I agree. So to go back real quick to the Investors Business Daily article, one of the things that they noted was P&G, Procter & Gamble, has 387 suppliers of over 9,000 materials in China alone. Wow. So talk about clustering. And I think it's well documented what the issues are with their supply chain fulfillment right now.
Well, let's shift gears here and let's talk about a global supply chain that my guess, not many folks are familiar with. I know I wasn't.
On 420, of course.
That's right. Okay, so cartels are scrambling as the virus snarls global drug trade. I got to tell you,
we're not talking about OPEC, right?
That's right.
Cali and other cartels, right?
Yes. Speaking of blind spots, this was certainly one for me. I have never read analysis on the illegal drug trade and the global supply chain there, but I guess we all have our blind spots, right?
Do tell, yeah.
So for starters, this report talks about how critical Chinese producers of chemicals are in the manufacturing of illegal drugs, especially for drug cartels in Mexico. And as you might imagine, the supply base for the international drug market, of course, has been deeply impacted by the same coronavirus that is impacting all other global supply chains. But get this. So according to this report, massive amounts of ingredients to make illegal drugs can be traced to a single state subsidized company in Wuhan, China. Of course, Wuhan is what many consider the epicenter, right, of the global pandemic, and there's still a lot of research and root cause analysis going into that. But this large city, as we talked about on an episode with Resilience 360 a couple of months back, this huge city has a very robust manufacturing sector that, of course, that was shut down after the outbreak earlier this year. So the article states, quote, advertised prices across China for precursors of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cutting agents have risen between 25% and 400% since late February, end quote. And that comes from Logan Pauly, an analyst. So the precursors of fentanyl, meth, and the cutting agents associated with these products, those costs have risen 25 to 400%, depending on what you're looking at. And that comes from Logan Pauly, an analyst at the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. So huge upsurge in your raw materials costs, right? So what's the impact been in the illegal drug market here in the States? And I'm curious. I'm not sure where they get these data points from, but incredible reporting. Cocaine prices are up 20% or more in some cities. Heroin has become harder to find in Denver and Chicago, while supplies of fentanyl are falling in Houston and Philadelphia. In Los Angeles, the price of methamphetamine has more than doubled in recent weeks to $1,800 per pound. I got to tell you, I've never seen any reporting on the illicit drug market, supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
But so maybe this is part of that silver lining we talked about in the last segment. Greg, what do you think?
If only we could cut it off. I think, what immediately came to mind is this is yet another indicator of what a bad actor China is. Right? I mean, I don't know if everyone out there has seen Breaking Bad, but as long as you're binging, watch that and look at what goes into it. As soon as you said chemicals in making it, I instantly thought meth.
Bad stuff. Yeah.
Fentanyl is deadly. So the reduction of any use of that, I'm all for. But these are such powerful agents. It's kind of like, it's not unlike other intoxicants. The demand for marijuana is up dramatically. The demand for alcohol is up unbelievably. People are self-soothing with this stuff. And, the fact that the prices are going up tells you that the demand remains, right? That's basic economics. So I wish there was a way to figure it out. I also wonder if you can do the research that is credible to do this, that is credible to provide these statistics, where does that information go, or where does the source of that information?
Interesting. I don't know. That's a good question.
Right.
On the alcohol increase that you're talking about, demand in alcohol, 247% is what Amanda just reported in our research team, Crackerjack research team.
I know it probably doesn't seem like it, but clearly I'm not drinking enough.
All right. So interesting stuff there. And clearly, as the story illustrates, everything has a supply chain. And Breaking Bad, if any of our listeners have not seen that series on Netflix and are looking for something that's very binge worthy, what an incredible series that is. And it'll open up your eyes to some of the things you didn't realize about the drug industry and its supply chain.
Yep.
All right. We've got a couple questions here. Claudia is recommending Selena, an expert, I guess, probably in she's a global risk thought leader. Maybe we'll have to have her and Claudia on one time, one of our future live streams. We've got a question here from a comment or a question here from Memory again. Memory is on fire today, by the way. Hope you're doing well. She states one of South Africa's major pharmacy companies has had to shut down some of their local branches due to employees contracting COVID-19. Would drive-through options be better suited to ensuring both customers and employees are not highly exposed to infection? I think we're seeing a lot of drive-through options here in the States, not necessarily for pharmaceuticals I'm aware of. I'm sure that's taking place, but certainly in the food and beverage industry, right?
Yeah, certainly there. And I have like everyone in the Atlanta area, probably in any major city in the States. If you come to four corners at any intersection, three of them have either a bank or a drugstore on them. And there was a period, and I don't know if they're still used, where you could do drive-through prescription pickup. I'm thinking of a particular store near my house, and I don't have any prescriptions, so I don't really know. But I know they had a drive-through at one time. I just don't know how popular it is. But that would be a great
opportunity.
Yeah. What's really interesting is how differently companies and even locations are managing the managing this crisis. I was in two different stores from the same auto parts brand yesterday, and one had basically barricades that kept you 6 feet from their registers, and the other had just plastic plexiglass screens in front of the register, and you could walk right up to the register in the very same chain. These stores maybe 8 miles apart. So interesting that it's up to management, individual management in a lot of cases to determine that.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of different methods, as we may have talked about on an earlier live stream, we got my mom on Instacart, right? Talking about ways of kind of insulating. Well. And those brave folks, Instacart, keep, we were talking earlier about folks that keep our industry moving forward. They seemingly haven't missed a beat. I know we use them here where we live, and especially for at-risk, high-risk folks, kind of keeping them out of the grocery stores. Yeah. Instacart has been such a great, outstanding service. So big shout out to the good people out there.
Hey, one quick point on that. I think your friend Neil Shaw mentioned that, and this is something for people to be aware. They substitute products. So if you want a product and the store doesn't have it, they substitute it. Quick shout out to the folks at Instacart. Allow people to be unfulfilled rather than to take a substitute.
Yep, great point.
Whole grain saltine.
All right, we're going to move to our final article here today, and really appreciate everybody's comments and engagement and questions. We got some curveball questions today for sure, but keep it coming. All right, so Greg, let's talk about what XPO's CEO, what his outlook is.
Yeah, so first of all, if you don't know who Brad Jacobs is, the CEO at XPO, read up and find out. He is not only CEO of a major company, but he's a major investor in the marketplace. He's got his finger on the pulse of all things supply chain, like our friend Ben Gordon at Cambridge Capital. These are probably two of the most prominent supply chain focused investors and experts that you can find. So Brad Jacobs, in a letter to shareholders, I'm sorry, there was a lot here, so I'm going to read this. This is not pre-rehearsed. Okay. He said 2020 is a lost year, and that is a quote. But he is bullish on late 2020 and even more so on 2021. So there is good news here. The thing you have to recognize is that Brad was, as late as February, considering breaking XPO into somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 different businesses because he wasn't getting the share multiple that he wanted out of XPO as a conglomerate. And he felt like he could provide greater shareholder value to he and his fellow shareholders by breaking them into LTL and other businesses separately and getting each of the respective market multiples for those businesses. On March 20th, happy birthday to me. On March 20th, he announced that he was stalling that plan because of the COVID situation. So that plan has been put on hold. But anyway, he is bullish on things. He is the one who I stole the quote from, seismic societal disruption. I think it's important for us to recognize that what we have to recognize is that this is more about governmental intervention in societal operation than it is even about the pandemic. To give you an example, I don't know if anyone's aware of ncov19.live. This brilliant kid in Washington has a statistics site online, and something like 18 million tests have been done. COVID tests have been done worldwide, and there are about 2.5 million cases of COVID. That means there are like 15.5 million people out there with something else that resembles COVID. So around 5 times as many people have what's not COVID as have what is COVID. So maybe we should be praying for those poor souls as well. But in any case, this is more, the change in commerce is more about the response to the pandemic than the pandemic itself. And that's part of the statement that he makes. But he said, and this is something we've said in the past week, but I'll reiterate it for the viewers today. But he said that XPO and many other companies, were ready for something like this because of, and he's just mentioning things in the last 20 years, the dot-com bust, right? 9/11 and the Great Recession of 2008. So these kinds of disruptions do come around every 10 years or so. This one, largely governmentally induced, but also can be halted, and we're starting to see signs of restarting the economy in Europe, in China, of course, and now in North and South America.
Yep.
Potentially. So anyway, the good news is he's bullish. Mega bull was his words. Bullish on end of 2020 and a mega bull in the long term.
So
for business. So
let's do a one of my infamous polls on a scale of 1 to 10. What's the best way to? I'd love to poll our listeners and get a sense of how bullish they are. So what's the best way we can frame that up, Greg? If we were to ask our listeners to give us a 1 to 10 based on how bullish they are, with 10 being the where's that bull statue? I think it's in Chicago, right? Or is it New York?
No, it's Chicago.
Is it Chicago? Okay, so that's like the stereotypical image of a robust bull. What's that?
They're probably everywhere now, but
yeah, probably so. Well, so to our listeners, give us on a scale of 1 to 10 on how bullish you are. Say for the second half of 2020, first half of 2021. 1 meaning not bullish at all, lots of more shutdown, lots of economic loss, and 10 being as mega bullish as Brad Jacobs is. Weigh in. Give us on a scale of 1 to 10. Tell us what you think lies ahead for us. And as we get those in, we'll share in the next few minutes here.
Where are you? Let's turn the tables on you.
Oh boy.
Where are you? First of all, can I let me redirect another question to you first. Would you agree that 2020 is a lost year?
I think it is next to impossible to recover to the extent where 2020 is going to be a positive economic. I mean, we've seen unprecedented, and there's that U word again, loss and shutdowns across global supply chains and beyond, right? Professional services, financial services. I mean, think of all the other activity that has been lost.
Yeah.
So I don't, I'm an optimist. I really, I think and believe very positively, rooted in facts, right? But I got to tell you, it's tough to recover from what we have lost and what we're still experiencing. Because when is everybody going to be real? When is beyond industry? When is society going to really feel like we can get back to that new normal? I mean, it's going to be late in the year, and that just is that's tied to so many economic activities and wealth generating activities and production. So I hate to call it a lost year, but it's not a good year. Not a good year is the obvious answer.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, Scott Luton, how bullish are you? So to be clear, Brad said he's bullish, mega bull, longer term. So that's probably well past 2021, but he's bullish on end of this year into 2020.
Yeah.
So how bullish would you say you are?
I like
2021.
I like Tevin's answer here on LinkedIn. I'm gonna just steal it blatantly. So Tevin says he is a 6. He's a baby bull with a virus that needs a vaccination, and then it's going to grow into a bull to help with other cattle breeding needs. That's what Tevin shared.
Get him on the air.
That's right.
Dude is a force of nature.
Tevin, hope you're well. Tevin's out
Yeah.
there leading one of the largest and most
Well, we mentioned
successful
his competitor, so you better mention them.
Well, so Tevin's with FedEx, so doing big things out there, helping us get past this current environment. St. Clair also is at a 6. Craig, hello, Craig. Great to see you. He's 7 to 8, so he's pretty bullish. Tevin also says that Brad Jacobs is speaking to his shareholders. That's a good point, good observation there.
Right. So it's a rah-rah moment.
Right.
But,
wait, real quick, I'm going to read a couple others. Pierre is a 7 for Q4, and I can barely read this small type. I think he's a 7 for Q4, 8 overall for 2020, I believe is what that is. And Tevin says that the second half of 2020 will be recovery. And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping that, once we break into June and July and certainly August, everything won't be back. We know that the new normal is going to be new, and it's going to be that way for a long time. But I'm hoping a lot of the activity does free up into the second half so that we can make up for a lot of the losses first half of the year. So I like how he thinks there. Claudia says, for some business, yes, a total irrecoverable loss, but maybe they were on shaky grounds regardless. That's a great comment, because there's been lots of business models, lots of industries, lots of organizations run a certain way that were already at risk. And we talk about at risk so much from a healthcare standpoint. There's a lot of at risk in industry and in business. So Claudia, that's a great point. All right.
my concern is the ones that so Nordstrom recently signaled that they're struggling, right? And that is, of all the department stores, and we've talked about a lot of department stores, that is one of the more responsible. So just a week ago, an industry analyst, forgive me, I don't recall specifically, but an industry analyst said they had about 8 months worth of cash. They could survive 8 months of complete shutdown. Macy's on the other end is around 4.5 months, as reported by Kathy Roberson.
One of the best leading analysts in all of supply chain, we believe. We might be a little bit partial, but she is great.
Might be. That's she'd tell you to hush.
She's great. Big fans.
But in any case, that it is going to be a difficult recovery. So.
Yeah, Memory just made a great comment here. 2020 is a year of re-innovating business models, kind of like learning to walk again. Memory, great comment there. And let's see, Pierre. Let me see if I can. So Pierre states, with the lost half year, the standard ERP system will look at the recent supply demand numbers to drive inventory planning. It is critical that supply chain professionals intercede the automatic output, especially if there is a rapid recovery. That's a great observation.
I think that's a great observation. And the bigger portion of that observation is, don't use your ERP to manage your inventory.
Right.
There are sound technological solutions that are much, much more robust. And that's one of the things that I think will come out of this, is people will cease to use subpar technologies to manage this. Subpar technologies and processes. Like I said, no manual. Hopefully no more spreadsheets, and let's not settle for what an ERP can give us. Let's find specialist, focused niche technologies that can do some aspects of the business better.
Yep. Claudia states Neiman Marcus was leveraged to the gills, and we see what happened today. Great point there, Claudia. Okay. As much as we hate to do it, we could do this all day. Hopefully our listeners are enjoying it as much as we are. We've had some really shrewd and insightful observations from folks tuned in, especially on LinkedIn mainly. But really appreciate that. It makes for a smarter conversation. All right, so we're going to move into offering a couple of resources that we hope you'll join us for. Our team is certainly working in overdrive to meet the demand from the markets, right? Folks need and they demand accurate information and best practices for navigating through these unprecedented times, these unique times. And we all have known that visibility in supply chain has been in demand for years, and it really lack of visibility has really come back to bite us here in the last few months for sure. So tomorrow, we are slated to have our webinar with EFT by Reuters Events on the Global Visibility Report, kind of where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed. So we have moved that event from last week to tomorrow. We're having a few logistics challenges. It's an international event. EFT obviously is based over in London. We may have to move it back again, but if you register for the event, regardless, you'll be kept in the loop of when we're going to produce it. So tomorrow currently is slated for 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time, tomorrow, Tuesday, the 21st of April, and looking forward to hearing their thought leadership on all things visibility. Right, Greg?
Even the information supply chain is under duress right now. My wife will really appreciate that. I would really appreciate that because I won't be able to join you because tomorrow is my wife Vicky's birthday, April 21st. So I'll have to take her to lunch during that time. Take her to lunch during that time. And so if we move that back, we would both appreciate that.
Well, happy birthday to Vicky. She is a cherished member, extended member of the team, I guess.
Indeed.
Really enjoyed our trip out to Las Vegas with the Reverse Logistics Association and all of her collaboration there. So hopefully you enjoy the day tomorrow, the two of you and the family. Okay. So the other thing, I'm just going to be really frank and transparent about this, because if there's been something that I've personally struggled with, is maintaining a certain tone during these times, right? There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of pain, from a healthcare standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and no one, that's not lost on any of us here at Supply Chain Now. However, what we've also heard a lot in the marketplace is a need to decompress and a need to de-stress and kind of let the hair down and take a departure from a lot of the COVID-19 focused content and conversations that we're all having. So in that spirit, we're really trying to, serve that need. So Greg, this Friday, we are conducting our first supply chain trivia contest via live stream. It's new. We've got about 7 different technology platforms that we hope are all going to play together very nicely. But it is going to be a departure. It's going to be a breath of fresh air, some friendly competition. And we invite all of our listeners to come check that out. You don't have to sign up, but if you sign up via our website or by shooting an email to Amanda there, and you see her email address, we'll send you some details of how it's going to work that might be really helpful. We're offering gift cards for winners. I think the winning prize, Greg, is going to take home a $200 gift card. That's not too bad.
Well, and this is a live event, correct?
That's right. It's going to be.
If you follow us on LinkedIn or any other platform, you'll be notified when this starts.
Absolutely, and I really hope, given this highly intelligent audience we've had here today, I hope we're going to see a lot of those same folks participate in what should be a hotly contested. We need to come up with like a trivia championship belt or something for the winner.
You and I are going to get the clock cleaned. I can tell you that.
I know I will. Well, so to our audience, we invite you to join us. Again, it's a departure from all the other stuff that is coming with the environment that we're all dealing with. It is going to be a live event. We'll go live 4:30 Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, April 24th. We may have a little bit of music, maybe from our friend Will Haraway again, like we did a couple weeks ago. But most importantly, it's going to be a fun, friendly supply chain and business trivia contest. And to make it easy, you can either you can join in the moment, and we'll tell you how to plug in, or if you want to get details a little bit earlier, you can shoot Amanda an email or register, which is first name, last name, email address, very easy, at supplychainnowradio.com. Make sense to you, Greg?
It does to me. Can I ask just one quick question that's
Sure.
really important, and I'm sure in the forefront of our viewers' minds? Should they bring a beverage to this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the easiest question we got all day today, I believe.
Yeah. Beverages and pizza, that will get people there, right?
Absolutely. And it looks like we are publishing that direct link to, we say register. It's not really, you're just providing first name, last and email, so we can send you a couple of details. We're using a platform called Kahoot, which is a really neat way of running group trivia. or even running educational events. But looking forward to that this coming Friday. Okay, Greg, as we move to wrap up, what did we miss?
We missed a really witty comment by the dog, Clay Phillips. 420 is Cannabis Celebration Day. 421, National Drug Test Day.
And for
really, don't panic, folks. But wouldn't that be hilarious?
Yes, it is funny. And 429, I believe, is National Supply Chain Day, which will be part of live streaming from Point A at the at GP Center here in Atlanta, right?
With the founder of National Supply Chain Day, Mary Kate Love. Yeah. So join us and meet the founder of National Supply Chain Day.
That's right. And Tevin said that I got the answer to your question wrong. He said, bring numerous beverages, not one. So,
all right.
Good stuff there, Tevin. Okay. So, to our audience, really appreciate all the engaged listenership here today. A lot of folks we're gonna have to get on the live stream at some point soon to share their insights and thought leadership. Again, you can check out these resources we're talking about at supplychainradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. If you enjoy our live streams, we've got some outstanding podcasts we're publishing this week, including the Rise Against Hunger, which took place today, the UGA students, the AIAG. We've got Jorg from iPoint will be publishing tomorrow, and talk about a passionate supply chain leader driving change. That was an excellent interview.
Great topics too. I mean, big NASA fan. Just all, I mean, unbelievably interesting cat.
Absolutely. Yep. And of course, be sure to join us next Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern time for the Supply Chain Buzz. On behalf of Greg White and Amanda and the dog and Vicky and really the whole team here at Supply Chain Now, wishing you nothing but the best. To our listeners. Stay safe. Please follow all of the guidelines, precautions that we're getting from our healthcare experts. And remember this, Greg.
Brighter days lie ahead.
That's right. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
We out.